Today's topic is a middleware in your API. And this is the last lecture from module about your web server. So after this, lecture 6 will be about Fast API, a real backend framework that you will use and you will learn. So this is last push of hard tasks and complicated algorithms, because when you will see how easily you can done some tasks in a real framework, you will be amazed, but you will understand how it works under the hood, but you will not have the need to write your own template, router, and stuff like this. So this is pretty simple topic with complicated realization and implementation. But let me reassure you that this is the last push for you for complicated tasks. After this, I think it will be easier, right, Dima? No? Okay. Next week, Dima will present you Fast API. I think it will be easier for you to understand topics after this, but middleware, I think, will be a little bit complicated, but like we can do this. So, what is middleware? Maybe someone know what middleware is. Okay, so let's see what we have right now. We have our server. We have method call, for example, and we have our handler. So handler is our function that we run when we have request with specific path, for example, specific variables in this request. So our server have a request as an input, then this request goes to the handler. Like in this moment, we doing some routing, we're trying to find what handler needs to be called for this request, etc. But basically, like more abstractly, we have request, this request goes to the handler, and handler gives a client response. What is middleware? Middleware is like an additional filter. So we can add additional method. For example, check aus. This method receives a request as an input and returns a response. But also, this middleware passes request to handler and receives response from handler. So this is like a filter. Middleware can manipulate request and can manipulate response. So basically, how check aus may work? It receives requests. Inside this method, we check if user who performing this request have an authority to call a handler and do some stuff on our server. If this client don't have access to our server, we are not sending a request to a handler, but returning an 401 unauthorized error. But if we checked our client, we see that this client have an access, we sending request to the handler, then have a response from a handler inside our middleware and sending client response. So middleware is a filter that can manipulate request. For example, we can add, for example, in the middleware, we have our request and we can change our request a little bit. We can change a path, for example, if we need. We can change some headers. We can add some headers in a middleware and send it to the handler. Then, or we can stop execution and send an error just from middleware and not even call, we can not even call the handler actually. And also middleware helps us to change a response. So for example, in the middleware, we have a response from handler. Response, it's content, it's headers, this is code of response like success or error. And we also can manipulate our response in the middleware. So our handler or even content. For example, we can create a middleware that adds footer. So this is not very production example, but we can do this. So in response, we have a content. For example, our HTML, our page, our hackathon page. And we can create a middleware add footer. Because, for example, in our website, we need the same footer on all our pages. And we don't want to add this HTML footer part in every file of every page. So we can create a add footer middleware. This middleware have a response from handler. Handler returns a page, for example. Inside, so this page is in content field of response. And in the middleware, we can manipulate our content. We can say content and add a footer. And footer, it's other HTML file, for example. And return to user not only page that our handler created, but also we can add a footer. So user will have site with footer. So this is the main point of middlewares. And the fun part is that we can add as many middleware as we want. So for example, we can add log request middleware, and for example, save information about request and response in some logger. Also, we can add something like, I don't know, check time middleware that will log information about how much time our handler worked at some point. And this will look like this. We have our request from client is going to log request. There some logic. Then this updated request or the same, for example, like it depends on the functionality of middleware. It can be an empty middleware that just receives request and return a response. But for example, we have some logic. Then we are moving this request to the next middleware. There some other logic. Then moving this request to next middleware, some logic. And after this request was to handler. Already updated maybe some amount of times request went to the handler. Then inside handler, we also have some logic, and we returning response. So response to this middleware, some logic happening. Maybe we changing response a little bit or not a little bit. Next, and we're returning response to the client. So middleware, we can use as many as we want. For example, 3, 10, 50, I don't know. Doesn't matter. Middleware is just a function. It's a filter that have a request as a parameter, and as a second parameter, it have the next function it need to perform. So when we creating this middleware function, we have request and also next function. Request, next function, request, next function, our handler, and our handler needs to return response. This function also return the next function. It's a response. We have response in the end. So this is a theoretical explanation of middleware. Also, we can imagine middleware, for example, I don't know, I had I thought, how can I explain you what is middleware? So, for example, we have an office of, I don't know, Jacek, for example. And Jacek, for example, has a secretary. I don't know, in a funny hat. It's a secretary of Jacek. So, for example, some documents, so Jacek needs to sign some documents, for example. And for example, we don't have a secretary. So those documents going to Jacek, he's signing it and returning signed documents to the person who wanted Jacek to sign those documents. But for example, Jacek have a middleware, a secretary, who checks if those documents really need a Jacek sign or no. So those docs, so we have our middleware, our secretary that checks, okay, those docs, no, there are no place for Jacek sign. So we are returning those docs before even Jacek knows about those docs, for example. But in other example, secretary says, okay, Jacek needs to sign it. And secretary moves those docs to Jacek. Jacek sign it and saying, okay, the docs to secretary, and secretary returns those docs to person who wanted to sign those docs. But for example, Jacek have 2 secretaries. The second secretary, I don't know, with the thing that do balloons with soap. How we call them? Bubbles. Yeah. This other secretary that have other tasks. For example, it needs to add documents in fancy folder. So someone said, okay, there are docs for Jacek to sign. This person take those docs and move it in a fancy folder, and moving this fancy folder to the secretary. This secretary checks if Jacek needs to sign it actually. If no, it moves to the person with bubbles, Bubbles person can say, okay, if this is unsigned docs, I can remove those docs from fancy folder and have this fancy folder for me and give those docs without fancy folder. But if Jacek sign it, I will return those docs in a fancy folder. So we already have two filters, two middlewares for Jacek. So is this, I don't know, do you feel it? I have a funny game for you guys. The person who will, at the end of our lecture, the person who will tell me an interesting metaphor or analogy about middleware will have 2 additional points to classwork. 3 person, 3. First 3 person, additional 2 points. Elizaveta, you wanted this point, you can have 2 if I will like your metaphor. Okay, so this is a middleware. Let's talk about request and response. Maybe like when I talked about request and response, it felt a little bit abstract, but basically, what is this? Request. What we have in our request? Please tell me. I told you about request and response information in lecture 2, I think. Yeah. Query. Okay. Yeah. Query is a part of, okay, method, query. What else, Maxim? Pass. Okay. So query and pass, it's basically pass is a, we divide in our pass to pass and query, but it's a pass. Okay, pass method and one more thing. Something that you don't fully understand why we need this. Hmm? Yes. Yeah, so we have method, pass, headers. And all of this is our request. So basically, you can create class request and inside init method, you can have as an argument environ. You remember what is environ, right? What? For our server. So inside our call method in our server, we have variable environ, and inside environ we have information about method pass and headers. And we can just, so the main purpose of request is to encapsulate all of this information inside one class. So basically we can say self pass equals environ and key for pass, etc. So we will have all of this information inside request object, and when we will pass it to our middleware, we don't need to pass 3 variables or tuple, for example, for God's sake. We can pass only object of request. We can change something. We can change pass, headers in middlewares or even in a handler. But request is just an object. It's a class that contains those variables. Maybe you will need some methods. For example, method change header. But it's up to you. Basically, it's just an object that contains information. Same thing with response. So what we have in response? What information? What data? Status, headers, response bytes. What's the name? The main part, like the HTML page or some text that we return. It's not a type, it's our content, basically. So we have the status, we have headers, and we have content. And this is our response. So basically the same as with request, response is just a class that contains this information. And here you can see that first time that we have our response in our handler. So basically right now our handler creates a content. So when we create our handler, when we registering our routes, we define a method that returns some HTML page, for example. So our handler calls templater, render template, create a string out this, and return it to our method call. And inside method call, for example, we can construct a response out of something that handler created. So, for example, we can create a handler this way. So the handler that we had from router, that we registered in router, returns content, and then we wrap this content in our response. We can already, we can know if this is an error or a successful response. So to the content that we have from handler, we can add status, and we can add some default, for example, headers for this, for any handler. And then in the middlewares, we can create a logic that will change headers, status. For example, in some middleware, when we already have a response, we have a logic that checks this response, check validity of data, for example. And if something with response are wrong, response are corrupted, for example, maybe HTML not properly rendered, for example, we can say, no, status not 200, status 415, some error, headers, add some to the headers, return it as not a successful response, but an error to a client. So this response. So the main thing. Let's see what you need to create for this project. So request, response, the same. You can see content, status code, headers. I will send you this. The same response, the classes that you will pass through the middleware. Then let's check your API. What you have already. You have init, you have add route, you have a get, post, and call. New methods, add middleware and middleware. This is the same. As you can see, middleware, it's a decorator. So it's basically the same thing as a get post. Because you can see, in init, we had routes, but now also we had middlewares as a list of callable. So list of functions. And we have middleware decorator. So we will register our middlewares like we registering our handlers. So we will write up middleware, and then def, for example, check aus, and the middleware logic here. So we need to create this list of callable. We need to create a decorator to register those middlewares, those callables that we will wrap around our handler. And this is it. Add middleware is just a function that do the same logic as a decorator, but in a functional way. You can see that we passing middleware as a parameter. It's an optional task. You will see it in your assignment. Okay, and here you can see how we registering our middleware. So we can use add middleware. So as an optional part, you will create not only functional middlewares, but also a class middleware. You can read about this in modules, but I decided that it's maybe too much. So a class middlewares will be as an optional assignment. So we will talk only about functional middleware. But class middleware also interesting topic. You will create an abstract method with a call, and you basically you will create a class that will encapsulate middleware logic inside class, and then you will pass this class, this type, as a callable, and then use this method call to basically do the middleware logic. But as I said, it's an optional task because I think it's a little bit too much, but maybe I don't need to say it right. But it's optional. But please do it. I will be very happy if you will do it. I will be amazed. Yeah, so, and here you can see how the example of our middleware function. It have request and call next. And now we will talk about middleware more deeply from the code perspective, for example. So, as you know, for example, we will register two middlewares. For example, aus. Let's remove it so you will not be distracted to other code. Aus. Aus middleware. Why aus middleware? Maybe check aus. And okay, and it will be better. So for example, as you know, inside your server, you will have a middleware's field. And this is a list of callables. So we can say, okay, we have aus, check, and log request. For example, we have two middlewares. Okay, inside method call, we have our route handler. That have params inside it, right? So first thing we want to do is wrap our function route handler into a wrapper that have as a parameter request and returns response. Because to use middleware, we need this structure. We need to have as a parameter request and return response. So what we can do? We can create a wrapper. For example, def final handler that have a request as a parameter. Then inside this method, we are calling the handler, the actual handler that we have, and return a response. And for example, in response, we can, so here, for example, some result, and we can create this response object with result. For example, result is a content. We passing this content to constructor of response. And inside this constructor, for example, we adding some headers, we adding status code. We can add this logic inside this wrapper, doesn't matter. The main thing is that now we have final handler that have a request as a parameter and returns response. Okay, then auth check. Our auth check, we can imagine how it will look. It will have a request as a parameter and also call next. This is next callable that auth check needs to call after it performs some actions with a request. And all our middlewares have basically three types of operations. First type of operation, something that we do before we call in the next action. For example, if request headers, for example, some auth header, but it will have other name, for example, auth header equal to something. It means, okay, so doesn't equal to something. It means that our user don't have a permission to communicate with our website. So we will raise some error response. For example, this is a class that we наследуємо. Yeah, so error response inherit a response, for example, and we do some, well, we're giving some information to error response. And after this, for example, we can say, we can print for our purposes, user have permissions, and then we will call next. So we can say our response equals call next, and in call next we are passing our request, because as you can remember, our middleware have a request on the input and then moving it to the next middleware and to the next middleware and to the handler, for example. So here, call next can be our final handler and can be our other middleware. And we need to pass our request to the next method. Then, after this, we can do some additional stuff with response. we can update response headers. We can update response content. We can do anything. Before we will return our response. So we can do some operations with response, and then we will return our response. For example, we will print aus middleware done, for example. So you can see we have 3 blocks. We have block pre call next execution, then call next execution, and then post call next execution. 3 stages. So how can we, for example, we registered aus check, and we have our final handler. We have our handler from row that we registered before. How can we wrap our handler around, how we can wrap our handler with our middleware? So you will do this programmatically, but if I will write it on a whiteboard, it will look like this. So we need call our aus check with a request, and then you can see that we have some call next, and our call next in this example is our final handler. So we moving final handler with request inside this. So we can imagine, and then we need to call this function. So this process will look like this. We calling our aus function. We moving here. We're doing some logic. Then we call next. But call next is our final handler. And from this, we're moving to here. We're calling our actual handler. We're returning response here. So we have our response from our final handler in our middleware right here. And we can do some manipulation with this here and return response, in this example, to our call method, and our call method will return it to our client. Okay. For example, we have a log request also. Let's create log request here. So def log request. Also, we have a request, and also we have call next. So all middlewares have the same structure. We have a request that we have as a parameter, and we have a function that you need to call that will have a request as a parameter. Log request. For example, we are printing some log request. Then we calling our method call next and printing log response and returning response. So in this example, we want we registered our middlewares in such a way. So first of all, we want our aus check performed. Then we want our log request performed, and only then we want our final handler be performed. So how can we achieve it? We need to wrap everything one more time. So we start our wrapping from log request this time. First action, we need to wrap our final handler in log request. So so this marker I'm done. First action, we need to wrap final handler in log request. So what we're doing, we say log request, we're passing our request. You can see this, right?
Good.
And pass a final handler request as a parameter. So in this example, what we have, we running our log request. We have our print, then call next will call our final handler. Then we will have this response. We will have this response here. Then we print something else, and then we're returning this response to a user. But we need to wrap it also in auth check middleware. This is our second step. We have, guys, it will be wild. We have, I need a black marker. We have auth check, then request, then what do you think? Log request.
Oh.
Log request that have as a parameter request and final handler that have as a parameter request.
Why?
Stuff like this. And how it will work. So first of all, let's remove those red lines and create a new one. So first of all, we will execute this function and we will run our auth check. So auth check, it's here, performing some logic, and then we are calling next. And in this example, our call next is our log request that receives a final handler as a call next. So here, call next, we will run our log request. We do some logic here. Then call next for log request is our final handler. So I could not do this. Okay, we're calling final handler that returns response. So we returning this response here, then performing some logic, then returning response from log request to auth check. So now we have a response that traveled from final handler to log request and then to auth check. We will do some logic here and return our response, final response here. So we can say some resp. You can take a photo with me and yeah, it's look like a battlefield for me. But I think you will have this experience during the lecture, during the
Sure.
Max. It's a last push. So yeah, sorry for those lines, but I hope you followed me with this. So we can I can remove, I can have a screenshot of me and use it as a preview for this lecture. Yeah, so this is basically it. You can have 10 middlewares and you will wrap them like this. The main questions for you guys, how to do this automatically inside your call method. This is the main task for you for this assignment. This is the most complete complete task for you guys in this assignment, because I can write this code by hands, but it's need to be automatic.
Yeah.
So this is it. Yeah. Okay. Let's hear.
Okay, so I created level. So we have student level as our student level.
Uh-huh.
For example, I have or have
Okay.
the cut.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I can say, oh, it's better.
Uh-huh.
Looking here and she will go this console and say here to only go.
Uh-huh.
This one is good.
Uh-huh.
And then it moves over and off you but the when it's like very apply.
Uh-huh.
Go to the university to get after the school. But like to university and ask more from the why there and with a yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then they let's go when yeah, so it's like there's new council guy, unit event, unit events to go to student council goes to head of student life have to go to the fountains, there's an answer, so we have 3 little one. Yeah. And then it's they give our announcement, the good, and then with white or something to them.
Okay. So in your example, what is request and what is response? Because in middleware, you need to pass the same structure through the all middlewares and have the same structure, maybe updated, but response is the same structure as a response through the all middleware. So in your example, what is request and response? It's a pretty abstract. In my example with Jacek, it's a document, it's something feasible. But party, so how can we return party?
Document is not where I asked what party, I don't know, some talk, and
Uh-huh.
then it
Other documents.
like either what's anything adult,
Yeah, but Buhalter can't give Katya physical party. You can create physical party as a client on the client side.
so then how it was like what's a little email, so some
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
as response we get наказ про
Uh-huh. Yeah, okay. It may be, for example, email as a request and наказ про проведення as a response. And for example, you as a a client in this structure, right? So Katya, Buhalteria, and other parts of this structure is a backend. And you want the party. So you're a client who said, I want the party. And you as a client can have this наказ про проведення and create a party on a client side in a browser. Okay, it's too abstract. Okay, no, 1.5 points for this because it's pretty similar to Jacek knowledge. It's even in the same university system, you know.
But one year around also at least 2 up to the
Okay, 2-1. Okay, rounded. Thank you, Katya.
then after the example knowledge like one
Uh-huh.
like
ChatGPT example. Mhm.
but like I wanted to the possible no.
Mhm.
No, it's just that
Okay, tell us restaurant analogy.
like the develop auto auto
Uh-huh.
task bacon go to that's your call
Uh-huh.
go to this
Uh-huh.
yeah you and that's worse.
Okay, so in this example, what is handler, what is middleware, what is request, and what is response?
And requested
Yes.
response
Okay, new. Okay. Uh-huh.
before
What is handler? The main function. The main action function method.
I believe
So administrator creates a dish.
no, but it's not okay or
It looks like a middleware to me. Like administrator is a middleware. Because if we have an order and returning a meal, I think the main function needs to cook this meal, right? And then on the other end, we can do some adjustments to this meal, for example. I don't know, remove a hair out. The waitress can remove the hair, and this is update of our response. But the main handler is a cook who creates. No.
but
Uh-huh.
only one check
Okay, so administrator is actually a aus check. Yeah. Okay. So next, what happened in your analogy? So tell me the whole pipeline of your system. So we have a client, actual client who ordered a food. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and
Uh-huh. What next?
we saw that it's separate.
Uh-huh.
They go to
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Cooks, right? Chef. Uh-huh. Chef. Okay. Uh-huh.
and breakfast or to look at one
Uh-huh.
when
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, 2 points. Okay. Okay.
so it was two examples.
Yeah, but one from ChatGPT and one that looks like my example.
So like
But you, as a student council, doing your job well. So maybe other metaphors, but please make something not about restaurant and Ayuk.
I was like beautiful photo.
Okay. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay. Uh-huh.
Go to some fire and providing wire parts. I want people
What is Labubu?
is what even though
Well.
all right.
Oh no. Do you know? But you know.
I think fine.
I totally heard it, but I don't know what is this.
it's literally on streaming. And
Oh, I saw it. Yeah.
it creates of it they'll
Wow.
excel it
Mm-hmm. Uh,
and so I'm going to buy it. It's going to be
why? Why? Why you need this?
because I cannot just buy it because it's random.
Right.
The dollar.
Okay.
That's why I go to buy because I want this
Uh-huh.
because it's all schemes.
Okay.
Those is a stock. Maybe I see
Yeah. So literally something like this, right? Uh-huh.
that those episodes and the sick announcer. We have people for we do not have
Uh-huh.
people who then sends their answer to our buyers. Yes. And after that, our buyer sends me the sample benefit gives me people who answer response. But if this buyer goes to start and stop saying this, no, we don't have people with it. It's the responsible. No, it is a responsible team.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Also 2 points. Because right now I know what is Pinkle Google. You also have 2 points.
What?
So yeah, great. We have a class assignment. Nothing special. Basically, you need to take your API class and create a decorator for registration of your middlewares. So it will look. So you need to create a middleware field, create a decorator that will register those middlewares, and you need to show this list, like you need to populate this list with some callable middlewares and show that you have done this. So for this assignment, you don't need to run, don't need to wrap anything with middlewares. You will do this at home, in the dark, with the rain, out of your room. But right now, what? Also, yeah, at some point. Yeah, but now it's stuff like this. Yeah, thank you very much, guys. And this is the end of our lecture. You can show your projects. If